let's jump in and take a look at some final uses of curves and where you might see the curves histogram and where you can adjust that in other places as well. Specifically, looking in Camera Raw, whenever you pull this up, you get your basic sliders when you're first opening up an image, but to the right of it, there's the Tone Curve tab. If you click on that, hey, look, it looks very familiar. It's the same sort of idea, only this is a little bit different in that we can't click and make custom control points. So if you want that kind of control and articulation, then it's really important to bring it all the way into Photoshop. But at least here, this is where you get the full bit depth to manipulate the tones. So this might be a really good place to start if you're shooting in RAW, to really play with it in here first. Don't go overboard before you bring it all the way in. And the way that this is set is you have your highlights, right, that just sort of boosts those guys. You have your lights and boost those guys. And we have our darks, which a lot of this image was, and then we have our shadows, right, the darkest of the darks. So play with it in here before you bring it all the way into Photoshop. So let's do something in there. Let's say I like that. Then you can hit Open Image, or if you want to keep playing with this huge bit depth version of curves, you can, here's a cool little tip, you can hold down Shift and open this raw image into Photoshop as a smart object, where you can keep on coming back to the smart object, or to the Camera Raw edits and the curve specifically. So if I do Open Object, check this out, this is neat. See, it is a smart object based on that little guy, so that means I can go back in here and adjust those curves or anything else that I need to just because of that one little button there, holding down Shift while you hit Open, and that will open it in that way. Cool, so that's one way you can keep on editing and seeing curves in other places. Another, if we go over to, not this one, this guy here. Back to this one, we went over this very quickly at the beginning. I just wanted to slow that down just a bit so you can see how this might work if you were doing compositing or any number of things. If you have a sky that you're bringing into a landscape and it's too dark or too light, this can be used in any number of ways. And it's called clipping, where we clip an object to another. So here's sort of the end result of a fun composite where everything's just sort of floating. But as I mentioned, sometimes when you're shooting, especially with composites or any number of things, each shot has a bit different in color, right? Maybe you're running the washer, so the lights you have are sort of varying, or it's a partly cloudy day and the sky is changing the amount of light. So that's what happened in this shot. Without the curves, it was just a bit too dark. So we can see I copy and pasted into that same spot, Command-C, wherever that was for that selection, Command-Shift-V to paste it in the exact same spot. And then finally, I created a mask to it, and I used a very soft brush. This is where I didn't need to do a very detailed selection. So with a very soft brush, just literally sort of painted around here. And if you match things right with curves, it doesn't need to be perfect. You can make it very soft. So adding one curves adjustment, let's take a look at what I did. Right, all I did was change my white point. I can literally bring this in. There's too much. We can see where it's affecting. There's not enough. But if I come in here while looking to the left, we can see where that wall basically just vanishes. There's still a little bit of color differences. There's some things that could use a little more help, but for just one very quick adjustment slider, right, setting that white point, that's amazing. You can match things and fine tune it to whatever level you want there. And you can do the same thing with color, right? Let's say there's a little too blue. I can come over to my RGB. And by the way, this is a really good way if you want to know if you do less blue that it makes more yellow and how to memorize that. You can come over here to our, you know what, best way to do it is get a hue saturation, a color balance adjustment, and that right there has the opposites. So if you have something that has too much blue, then if you take away the blue, it's going to get more yellow. If you have something that's too much green, you take away the green, it's going to go more magenta. Red, take away from red, goes more cyan, and vice versa. So this is sort of your cheat sheet if you wanted to know what adjusting your each channel is going to do with red, green, and blue. That's how it works, right? Those are the opposites, additive versus subtractive color. Anyways, different class, that would be good. So I set my white point, and if I needed to, I can really adjust exactly how each needs to be. Clipping a curves adjustment to an object is great, so let me just make sure that we go over how to do that. So there's a couple different ways. One is you can click on this little button here, and this will tell it to only adjust that one object. Let's take this off here. So this will only adjust that single layer directly beneath it. The other really great way to do that is you hold down Alt or Option and hover. See, there's that sweet spot right between those layers. That will also convert it to a clipped layer that's clipped to only exist where this one does. So in effect, If I do something radical, again, it's only going to affect that one layer rather than be global and everything else. So when you clip it, it's not only good to sink it in, but just make sure that you're using that button, otherwise that trick doesn't work. One last really cool thing to do with curves that I use all the time for compositing, but it can be used in any number of ways, is let's say you have an object here and we want it to blend in, something like this. So we have all this fire and it's all blending together. There's not a whole lot of masking going on to get rid of the black. Instead, I do a I change my blending mode to screen. By the way, we have a whole class on doing this kind of thing that you should definitely check out with light painting in your own effects. But for this idea, when I change my blending mode to screen, everything that's black disappears, right? Didn't have to do any masking for that. I'll have to mask this out to get that looking right. But let's say I wanted some parts to pop out more, or I wanted to disappear in a different way. This is bringing it back to curves, a really great way where you can control it almost as a threshold. You can use levels for this, and there's other ways to do it. But again, personally, I love curves, just going straight to it. So curves adjustment, and I clip it any number of ways. I can either click this button, hold down Option or Alt, and click between these two. There we go. So now check this out with this blending mode. This is where you can start being MacGyver and putting different parts together, right? You have a toothpick and something else and a cannonball and waha, you have a catapult. Anyways, this is where you can take all these neat features and start using them in more intricate and helpful ways. So with a clipped curves adjustment to this layer that's set to blending mode screen, this is where I can take this, and if I move it up, it's going to become more apparent, right? Because the highlights come through in blending mode screen. If I bring it down, I can make it vanish a bit more. And what's neat is, again, if it's changing the color too much, this is a good example, change this to luminosity, right? That way it's just going to be changing how much of that layer is coming through. So I can literally use this as a threshold maker, right? If I want this to sort of disappear or appear, you can do it that way. Or you can even bring this whole thing down if you want to fade it. So using curves as a threshold way. And there's so many different other uses for curves adjustment, especially when working with layers. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So it's up to you at this point to take what you've learned in this class. Hopefully it's been really helpful and fun, and to see where you can go from there and how to add your own things to make whatever amazing imagery you can come up with. So I hope you've enjoyed this class. Again, my name is Brett Malley. I'm a Kelby 1 instructor. If you like this class, check out other works that we have. You can see my own work on my website, brettmalley.com, Brett with one T, or you can do Photoshop with Brett Malley on Facebook as a Facebook search. Also take a look at other classes, such I have one on how to levitate, right? We're looking at that image for a lot of the demo here, how to levitate objects and pets and people and all those things. One on how to create your own shadows that are composited, and then one also that we just did on this light painting idea, which is really fun. So take a look at those other classes if you've enjoyed this one, and hopefully you'll put your curves to good uses and have a great day.